Welcome to the Mission Ready podcast, where we focus on building high-performance teams. My name is William Brenda. I'm a retired Navy SEAL with 26 years of service. I'm a business and leadership coach, sniper instructor, public speaker, and some other stuff. I am joined by my co-host, Brenda Neckvatal, and she is...
Not as wired as you are, but that's all right. It's later in the afternoon. So I am a group dynamics and crisis management expert. I am a recovering human resource professional and entrepreneur, speaker, and definitely
best-selling author. Best-selling author. That's what I have in my notes over here. Yeah.
2 times best-selling author.
Times two. Yeah. Actually, I had someone reach out to me about working with you yesterday.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, and they were like, so what's it like working with Brenda? I'm like, well, it doesn't count because I'm writing a book with Brenda, but because he was asking about, writing a book. And I was like, yeah, and she's a two times best-selling author. And I was pretty sure I didn't mess that up. Looking to beat a third-time best-selling author as soon as our book comes out. So anyway, I didn't mean to derail the conversation.
No, that's okay. It's all good. You can blather on about that all day long. I'm good with
it. Right on. So what do we got today?
Each other in check. Can you tell?
What's on the agenda for this morning or afternoon your time?
Yeah, my afternoon, your morning. We are literally coast to coast, or coast to island, I should say. So, do you know what? Today we're actually talking about, because we got a really good question that came in that eventually I want to get to. Is really kind of talking about decision making under pressure and like how do we make informed decisions during very like high stakes situations. That's the goal for today, is kind of talk about through that stuff. And both of us have definitely seen our fair share of wild action, totally different types of scenarios, different types of operating environments, but I think everybody probably is going to be most curious about some of the stuff that you've gone through on the teams first, and then we can kind of snoodle on over to my side and what that looks like from a business standpoint.
Cool. What is the question?
So the question that we got,
I know we have a handful of questions that came in. So
yeah, we did. We had quite a few, which I'm really excited about. So there's a gentleman by the name of Sam. And he wrote in and he said, we struggle with prioritizing our urgent tasks during crises, and it tends to lead to delays and inefficiencies in their responses. And his question to us is, how do we prioritize competing demands and make fast decisions during a crisis, which is a fantastic question.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So
yeah.
As you were reading the question, I was reminded of, I wanted to maybe kick this off with like a war story, but I'm actually not going to. I'm going to kick it off with a personal experience story that has nothing to do with business really at all. But the thing that most companies, most leaders struggle with is sort of that, what is important? Most people, I think it's most people struggle with what's important. Especially in a high stress situation. And so some of the things that when you're in a high stress situation, there are things that you can control and there are things that you cannot control. And so the first thing you need to focus on are the things that you can control.
Yep.
And then be as offensive as you possibly can and attack those things that you can control. And I have a graph and a grid and, my own sort of decision-making process, going through OODA Loop and things like that. However, before I go into that, I want to talk about, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. And I was reminded of that recently on a flight where it was a super early morning flight. I showed up at the airport and everyone, I'm a Delta, flyer, and everyone is a Sky Priority lane. Everyone. And I'm like, I know that not all of those people are Sky Priority, and there were no people in the non-Sky Priority line. And so I got in the Sky Priority line and I observed what was going on. This kind of goes back to OODA Loop. I observed what was going on, and I recognized that not everyone in line was a Sky Priority member. They're like, regular people, which there's nothing wrong with that. But, I'm Sky Priority. I'm almost a 2 million miler on Delta because I have paid my dues in that arena of flying around the world. on a commercial aircraft, spending many, many hours, days, weeks, months inside of a tin can in the air. So I've earned that sky priority title, I guess. And so there's like 20 people in line. And so eventually I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm not staying in line with the non-sky priority people. Because again, if everyone is a priority, then no one is a priority. So I got out of line and I got in the non-priority lane. And the Delta agent was like, okay, if you're not a sky priority member, move over to the other line. No one moved except for me. And then I not watched the next like person check in. They were not a sky priority person because I can tell, I know, the system. And then the next person, and then she was like, okay. And then she called on me, and she was like, okay. I was like, and that's what I told her. I'm like, listen, if everyone is a priority, then no one is a priority. So let me be a non-priority over here, which automatically made me a priority, made me different. If everyone is the same and no one is different, there's no distinction, then there's no priority. So I just moved over to the non-priority lane, and it put me in front of the 20 people that were in front of me that got there before me, but they weren't being honest with what their status was or whatever. They didn't think it mattered. And so after I went up and I got served, a whole bunch of people moved over to the non-sky priority lane, and then it just went back and forth, one and one. So control what you can control. And if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So when you're dealing in high stress situations, where you have to prioritize stuff, you have to figure out what's the most important thing. And, sometimes on the battlefield, you have to decide whether you go left or you go right. And sometimes it's not clear until you actually start moving. And so, going back to this OODA loop, observe, orient, decide, act, I observed, in that line, I observed that everyone is in the sky priority line. No one is in the non-sky priority line. So observe that. I oriented myself. I'm like, okay, I got in the sky priority line, and I noticed that no other people were not sky priority members. So I decided to go get in the non-priority lane, and I took action. And by taking that action, I actually moved to the front of the line. Moved in front of 20 other people because I observed what was going on and I took action. And then that action, got me to my flight on time because I was already running a little bit late. So anyway, if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority, and you just have to observe, orient, decide, and act. I'm also kind of reminded of, some sniper operations that I've done. Every time we roll into a sniper hide and set up our position and things like that, the first thing we do is we build a range card. And the range card tells us, gives us landmarks in our area of where we could potentially take shots, and allows us to range how far targets are, or we call them TRPs, target reference points. So we know about how the distance of anytime a potential target comes up. So we've done this as sort of building contingencies in when targets pop up. So, what's important in a sniper operation is, number one, observing everything that's going on, identifying your target, and not missing when you need to take a shot. So one of the key things that affect your bullet when you take a shot, number one is windage, and number two is, did you dial the right range into your scope to give you the proper elevation so you hit your target? Rather than if you're taking a 600-yard shot and you have your 100-yard dope in, you're just going to hit the ground in front of the guy. So building that range card, building those contingencies in place, knowing where you need to aim and what you need to do in the event that a target pops out, gives you that opportunity to respond to the crisis much more quickly. But that's because you did some planning in the front end, preparing for things that could go wrong. Whether things that could go wrong are your enemy, your competing companies start taking some of your market share, or you have an HR scenario, or your marketing goes sideways and all of your ads on the book of faces gets shut down for some dumb reason. And or people aren't as educated as they need to be in some of the processes or things that they need to do in the company. So on the leadership side, you have to start thinking about those contingencies when you start moving forward. Do a dirt dive and kind of practice what if things go wrong. And I'll pause right there and hand it over to you.
I love it. So you're absolutely spot on. And there's a couple things that I started thinking of when I was listening to you. And one of the reasons why training and development is so important is that it actually helps you to think critically when things are coming up, because when you learn a new skill or you learn a new way of doing something, what happens is that you're broadening your options, right? And so when it comes to crises, first off, you're never going to have completely all of the right answers all of the right time when it comes to a crisis, but you can hit it relatively often. And so by not having, and I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So several years ago, it's like story time, kids, right? You know, pull up to the fire. Let's have a story. So 7 years ago, I was training as a dive master. I've been a rescue diver vast majority of my adult life. I started scuba diving when I was 14 years old, and I
I
wanted
think that's illegal nowadays. You can't scuba dive until you're 18. Sorry, derailed.
totally. Now you know why I say I'm the one that keeps them in line. Anyway, um, we had so in my training we did a lot of drills. Like every time we would go in the water, we would do a drill, and I was always working with students. And that can be, talk about crisis, right? You can be at 25 feet of water and all of a sudden you've got somebody who's either in an active form of panic or it's in a passive form of panic, and suddenly like decides not to breathe out of the regulator and just look at you like, I don't know what to do. And you know, you have to kind of be ready for those things. So the more you drill and the more you practice on things, the better you get. And that's the reason why training is so important. And in this case, I was on a flight. I think I was coming back from Chicago, I think. Anyway, I was on United Airlines excuse me, US Airways before American bought it. And I was flying from Chicago to Charlotte, had to pick up a connection in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then go back to Richmond, where I was living at the time. And I'm in the back of the aircraft. I'm up against the window, zoning out. And all of a sudden, I hear this weird gurgling sound. And it was coming from the gentleman on the other side of the aisle. And I'm like, what is that? And I look over to my left. The seat in the middle between me and this woman was empty. And it could have been 45 feet away. I mean, it was just, it felt so long. I look over and I see this guy. His eyes are closed. His head is tipped back. He's a big dude too. And he's gurgling for air. So I immediately jumped up. Like I took a breath. I could hear my heartbeat and I jumped up. And the woman's, you know, she's starting to stand up now, and I'm like, move, right? And I jump in front of this
Move.
guy. I did. I said, move. In this real deep voice. And I said, I got in front of the guy and I said, sir, my name is Brenda. I'm trained in first aid. Can I help you? And he is just gurgling for air. And I called it out. Like I'm looking at him. This plane is moving on the tarmac, by the way. We're in motion. And so I look at him and I'm like, sir. And he stops breathing. And I just yelled it out. He stopped breathing. And I go to pick him up. I take off his seatbelt. The two guys from behind, I said, let's get him into the galley. And I start directing what's going on. Next thing you know, I hear thump, 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 thump coming up behind me. And it's the purser, the manager of the flight. And the flight attendant in the back is going, should I tell the captain to stop? And I said, yes. I said, pull out your AED unit. I said, and give me 25 cc's of free flowing oxygen. And next thing you know it, there's a physician that comes hauling in from the front. They grab the guy and they pull him in. Like all of us are moving to get him back. And we're about ready to do chest compressions. The purser takes over, which is what should have happened. The physician cracks open his shirt. They start doing compressions and start doing breath holds. At this point, I know my job is not to back off, but my job is to turn and manage everything else, because people have a tendency to get weird and they come charge you back. Long story short, what happened is that all of those drills that I did in preparation for something automatically kicked in without my having to think about it. And when you are in crisis mode, when you're prepared and you've done training, what happens is this confidence just comes out in you because you know exactly what to do. The priorities shifted when two people of a higher authority came back, and one being the manager of the flight and the other one happened to be a physician. That meant that it's time for me to stand down. But that also means that there's other stuff now going on behind me that nobody knows how to handle except me. right? And so, let me tell you something. I was physically in pain the following day because of the amount of adrenaline that was coursing through my system. Um, but nonetheless, the, I wasn't so much concerned about the big picture of everything. I was more concerned about what can we manage right now, what needs to happen right now, and where are our risks. And our risk is there could have been a family member that could have gotten up and started charging towards the back, flailing and wailing in absolute panic. That meant that it was up to me to control that, because the last thing you want is somebody jumping on top of the people that are doing compressions and saving this guy's life. The good news is the guy made it. He had a shockable rhythm. There's only 2 shockable rhythms. He had it. His chest was totally caved in. We rolled him over. He came to, and the physician's like, sir, we just want to let you know you've had a heart attack and we need you to hold still. And the only thing I heard coming from this guy is, well, that's a real pain in the ass. And I'm like, yeah, he's gonna be fine. So it was just like, it was crazy. And the doc looked at me, says, how did you know to do all of that? And he's like, are you a paramedic? I said, no, I'm a rescue diver. And he goes, well, you've been trained by some of the best. And so, what happens is that when we're in a crisis mode, or when we're in a situation, it's like leaders, when there's a threat or if there's any type of contention, like our vision starts to narrow, as it should, for a little while. But then we have to remember, it's like we got to lead beyond the moment, which means that we have to force our aperture back open again when we're involved in things like that. And then we have to just remember that there's a chain of actions that create an incident that eventually lead to some form of consequence. Either it's going to be a positive consequence or a negative consequence, which means that once the immediacy of whatever's going on, and in this case, it was this guy not breathing, right? Once we got that under control, or we had the right people in the moment handling it, that means somebody has to lead and figure out, okay, now I got to pull this aperture back open again. Now what is it that we have to do? Because we have our objectives that we still need to meet. And so I think if you start figuring out where can we start training that builds confidence within our team, or how do we train and prepare for these types of situations, you're going to have more success. You're not going to trip over the things like, well, the what ifs and the and buts. It's like, you're going to be having to take some serious action. And eventually what happens is that when you experience enough crisis around whatever the business thing is that you're going through, Sam, is that you're going to be able to say, okay, this is important, this is not important.
Yeah, I like that that analogy, especially the last one you talked about, and when stressful things happen, your aperture closes.
Yeah.
Because you're focused on that single stressful event, whatever it is, whether it's, bad press, or something HR related, or, your stock price just fell through the floor. Like, what do you do? How do you handle that? Profit margins start shrinking, things like that. Like, but your job as the leader in the organization is to step back and detach yourself from that situation. I can think about Hell Week, where, when Hell Week first kicks off, it's super chaotic and gunfire and explosions, and they have you do all these silly things. And I remember someone at some point prior to Hell Week, who had already been through Hell Week, they told me, at some point during breakout, you should step back and just look around, see what's going on, like, and you'll be surprised at all the stuff that's going on that you have no idea, because you're like in the middle of it and you're just focused on like getting yelled at and doing everything, as perfectly as you can, knowing that you can't do everything perfect and all this other stuff. And so at some point, an instructor's like, go hit the surf. And so I grab a swim buddy. I let my boat crew leader know, hey, Joe and I are going to go down to the ocean and we're going to go get wet and we'll be back in a minute. And so we left, we went down to the ocean. As we're coming back, I slowed way down and started looking around. And then I got back to, the boat crew leader. I let him know that we were back. And then I kind of stepped off to the side. I didn't start doing 8-count bodybuilders right away, or whatever stupid thing they had us doing. I just stopped. I looked around, and I didn't realize that, there's the Buds compound. It's like a horseshoe, and there are balconies on those horseshoes, and they were full of people out there watching us, do breakout, which is kind of an exciting, fun chaotic thing to do during Hell Week, and you get a lot of people quitting during that because they get all stressed out, or I don't really actually know why. But had I not stopped and removed myself from the situation, I would have known that all those people were there. There were probably 100 people on the balconies, families, civilians, news crews, whatever it is, PAO. But it's because I stopped focusing on the thing that I needed to do. I stepped back, I detached myself from the situation, and I looked around the battlefield, and I got to see everything that was going on. And so the same thing in business, the same thing in combat. Detach yourself from the situation. Yes, you're going to be focused on the immediate threat right away, but then you have to separate yourself and open up that aperture and look around and see what's actually going on around you. Yeah. And I think the other thing that you said that was super critical are do these drills. Those are the things that will make you more prepared. That's why we go out and we practice being in a gunfight. We practice all the things that we do so that when we get overseas, I was actually talking to Rob O'Neill about this the other day when we did a podcast together. I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast before or after, but we would go and do really hard things, really like stupidly hard things in training. And he was like, why do we do that? Why do we go kick ourselves in the balls? And it became very obvious, right after he had asked the question for both of us is, there's a saying that the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in combat. And so, but that's because we go and we do really hard things and we put ourselves in like the worst, situations that you could possibly think of in training. So when we are facing those things in combat, it's not new. It's not something that we've never seen before. Maybe it's not exactly the thing that we've seen before, but it's very close to the right answer. It's very close to something that we've trained for, we've experienced, we've had failure in, and we figured out how to work through those situations. So anyway, doing drills. I was going to talk about another example, but I'll stop right there. But as much as you can prepare for scenarios to go badly, if you plan for things to go badly, when things do go badly, because they will, yep, you're more prepared to handle those high stress situations.
Yeah. And that goes with your leadership development too. It's like you're listening to this podcast because you want to be better at something, right? You're probably not just studying ours, you're probably studying other people. And that's fantastic. But you know what? The more development that you invest in yourself as being a leader, eventually what's going to happen is you're going to be faced with those really hard days. And all that leadership training that you've been working on for however long you've been doing it, it all will kick in. And here's a really great example. And this goes back to the exact same story. Think about the captain of that airline, of that plane, right? That man cannot step out of the cockpit every time something goes wrong. And so he allowed his team to actually do what they needed to do. And they kept him informed. And, believe it or not, at the end of it, he actually came out and shook my hand. And he says, I don't know too many people that would have done something like that. I'm like, it just free flowed, abs and flow, it's just the way it happened. I didn't really even think about it. But, put yourself as the captain of the flight. And I would love to hear what you were going to say, Will. Say it anyway. Say it anyway.
I have no idea.
Oh, I have no idea. Now it's gone. Welcome to my world. Happens all the time. So, but look, you're going to be at whatever level of leadership, you either, as the apex leader, as a CEO of your company, or you're somewhere in between, or you're just beginning. It doesn't matter. Like the more you develop yourself, have the confidence that this is going to actually come out. You're going to make mistakes, and that's fine. You're also going to learn from those mistakes. And Will tell you all day long, his favorite thing to do is to fail.
Yeah. You know what? I actually was going to say something. And, one of the things was trust your team. As you were talking about that captain of that airplane. But the other thing I was thinking of was, you talked about leadership training. And, I talked to you about this right before we got on and started recording this podcast. I have a client in the Middle East who works at a bank, and, he reached out to me because the leadership training that they have in that organization is terrible. It's not good training. So oftentimes you have to invest in yourself. If you want to be a better leader, you need to invest in that, or get your company to invest in it, and reach out to your professional development partners, departments, training and development. if there's not a budget in there, see if you can get a budget for training and development and bring in experts in leadership, experts in crisis management, experts in all these things, so that when things go sideways in your organization, you're able to have a better answer for those things going sideways.
Yeah. And, and just remember that when crisis is happening, priorities are going to shift. And so, you're going to have your super stressful crisis, the things that need to be done, like the guy that we had to haul into the galley, pulling out the AED unit, making sure that everybody knew what their role was. Once that has been executed, you have to get back in line with decisions that align with your number one business objective, because business is still going to be happening. Life is still going to keep going on, right? So if you're a leader in an organization, you have to come back to, is this, if every decision while this is going on in crisis mode, is this going to help us sell more X? Is this going to help us serve our clients? And if the answer to those questions are no, then it's not a priority.
Yeah. And so one of the things I was going to talk about earlier, I debated whether to talk about it. And, I like to use this 4-quad concept of like, is it easy and has high impact? Is it hard and has high impact? Is it easy and has low impact? Is it hard and has low impact? Obviously, the things that you should focus on first, if it's easy and it has a high impact, low hanging fruit, boom, done. Quick win, move on, help move the needle forward. But a lot of things are, high impact, but they're hard to do. And so, but I would do the low hanging fruit, the easy, high impact things, knock those out, get them out of the way. Then you don't have to worry about it. That's less things you have to worry about making decisions on. Then after that, what is the highest priority, kind of in order of hard to do, and then do those things as a general rule. Other times you're going to have things that just pop up and you just have to attack this one target. It's a hard target. You got to, figure out how to maneuver your team around to take out that target, whatever it is. Again, it could be, your advertising model got shut down. And so you need to put all effort into turning that back on in order to get new clients in the door, new customers. Or, maybe it's a, disgruntled employee that you have to manage out of the organization. Or, maybe there's a lawsuit on your hand and now you have to manage that not great news. Whatever the thing is but you're only going to know what those things are by doing contingency planning, doing these drills, doing like the what if, asking yourself what if during pretty much any scenario. Everything seems to be going right. What if? Think about worst case scenario. Again, going back to talking to Rob about the Bin Laden raid, and he was like, yeah, the newest guy on the team said, well, what if the helicopter crashes in the courtyard of the compound? And they were like, oh, we didn't really think about that contingency, and it actually happened on the raid. Youngest guy, least experience, might have been being a smartass asking that question, but you know what? They're like, you know what? We hadn't really thought about that, so let's make a contingency plan, and that actually happened. So planning everything you're doing, you can plan for everything to go right. You should always plan for things to go wrong, and then have a contingency plan in place for when they do.
Yeah. I think the fail point is that when you believe that nothing bad's gonna happen. I mean, you can say it in your mind, but honestly, in your heart, you better be ready for it.
What are the second, third order effects of whatever's happening?
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing, actions that you take.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. If you do that, you'll be ready. All
right. I think we've beaten this question.
Did we ring it out?
I think we did. I don't think there's any blood left in that turnip.
That's good to know. That's good to know.
Well, and if any of you listening have questions about the answers that we just gave, drop a comment. Drop it in wherever this video or this podcast is posted, wherever you hear it or see it. Let us know. Let us know if you got anything out of it. If you have questions about our answer, and then maybe we'll hop on here and knock out another episode to answer your question.
Maybe we are gonna knock out another episode, but maybe not on the same topic, but that's all good. Oh my gosh. Well, listen, we do have some pretty exciting stuff coming down the pike. We do have our new book that is coming out. We do not have a release date just yet, but as soon as we're getting closer to narrowing that down, once we have that, then we are going to literally start blasting it out there. And it's a pretty awesome book. I'm really excited about it. And it mirrors this podcast, right? It is called Mission Ready. So hang on for that. We're looking, we really, really appreciate you guys being on here, and we're going to ask that you help us be successful, and we're helping you guys be successful as much as possible. We're going to ask that if you could do us a favor, give us a like, a share, and a 5-star review for this podcast. The more we get the word out to everybody else, the more that we're actually fulfilling our mission, and that is just to help everybody win in life and business, and we're pretty excited about it. And if you want to find Will and I, we're all over the place. We're all on social media. My last name is so wonky to spell. I've made it really easy for you guys. If you want to find me on any of the social channels, the big ones, you can just do hashtag Dear Brenda, and you'll be able to find me. Will's a little bit different. He's the only Will R. Branum. So or William R. Branum, you can go ahead and search him. He's also on all the channels as well. And then, we tend to also post stuff about each other. That's nice. No
only nice things. We don't think bad things about one another.
We've been friends for too long, and I'm sure
only behind closed doors.
We'll probably wind up punking each other at some point in time. Just knowing how we are. We usually do that when offline, when nobody can hear us.
Right on.
You should pick on yourself.
I do, as a matter of fact.
You do.
All right. You have anything else for?
I don't.
For the show.
I just wanted to have more fun.
Well, you know what? Maybe we'll do another episode and have some more fun.
There's no maybe. We are.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Thank you guys for listening. Like Brenda said, leave us a 5-star review. Tell us you love the show. Tell us you hate the show. Tell us, questions you have, send them in. Again, this is the Mission Ready podcast. My name is William Branum, and this is Brenda Neckvatal. Thank you guys for listening, and stay mission ready. Talk soon.
See you guys.